Nothing contained in this podcast should be considered a substitute for professional medical advice. This content does not represent our respective employers and is purely the opinion of the podcast hosts. We are not your personal medical providers. Sorry, friends. So, if you have concerns or are seeking a diagnosis or treatment, please seek individual advice from a healthcare provider in your area. We are not liable for any risks associated with acting upon the information contained in this podcast. This is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only, so enjoy the ride.
Please drink responsibly and in moderation. Before drinking, please be sure to be of the legal drinking age for your country. We do not encourage the misuse of alcohol.
Welcome to Medical Media Mixer, the perfect cocktail. I'm Nicole Peniston, psychologist.
And I'm Tara Prisco, physician assistant. All right.
Hello.
Ready? I think just to tell our listeners, little glitches in the new year with our sound. It's fixed. It was just our program needed us to reselect our microphones. We're all good. We're back.
Just dumb. Technology's dumb.
Just ignore the technology problems in the first few. So we are a little bit running behind on our recording schedule for today. Nicole had work until late, and I was dealing with frustrating online trying to book flights between 3 different people, complications.
Oh boy.
It was interesting. That's for our Alaska flights. I thought this whole idea of mile pooling was cool. So I had my husband and I pool our miles so we could use them. And then when you pool your miles, I didn't know it meant you can't use money plus miles when booking a flight. Mm-hmm. So then I had to unpool the miles, and then it gave him some of mine. It split it 50-50. And I was like, wait, I have more. So then he had to book himself in one kit, and I had to book myself in one kit, and my in-laws had to book theirs. And we all had to coordinate the seats at the same time on different devices.
Yes. Sounds very familiar. That's what Jackie and I had to do when we went to Sedona. She was she was at home, but then her cousin had mirrored the computer on the TV. So she's like, I'm seeing it giant, on the TV. I'm like, why? She's like, I don't know. I'm just doing it. So it was fine. It worked out.
It was a little stressful, but we are home and we were ready to go.
All of that for a Monday night.
Seriously, it is a Monday for sure.
Yeah.
It is definitely a Monday.
This is how Monday it is. I had my receptionist call my 9 a.m. to ask if they were showing up at 9:15. They were scheduled for 10.
Oops. That's all right.
Because I'm so used to having a 9 a.m. to start. Yeah. And I had even blocked it out, but it didn't register in my head. I was just like, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Where is everyone? Well, and because I don't know if you have this, but in the new year, we get a lot of cancellations with insurance changes. Yeah. People don't want to use their deductible. So it was entirely possible that they could have canceled, but that was not the case. It was me reading the schedule wrong. So
it happens.
That's how Monday it is. And I had coffee, so I can't even blame that.
No. You have not watched The Pit yet, right?
I have not, but what I did do was finally finish Stranger Things.
Oh, I just started the last season. I had to write watch a recap on YouTube to remind me of everything that's happened, and we just watched the first episode of the last season.
Then once you watch it, we'll discuss. I'm actually going to cover something from it in a future episode.
Cool.
But it's more of a general theme versus a specific thing from season 5. But
cool.
I am with the camp that is not happy.
With the way it ended.
Although there is a theory that should be tested today that they were doing a behind the scenes and that the behind the scenes will give way to an alternate ending.
Huh. All right. Well, I need to close my ears because I have a whole lot.
I'm not going to tell you any spoilers, but honestly, I'm so dissatisfied with it. I don't feel like there's any spoilers to tell. You're just not going to be happy.
Oh, no.
You're not going to be happy.
I heard that some people said they cried at the end and all this.
I cried at the end. And to some of the people who are staunchly against the haters and feel like the finale was wonderful, yes, there was a lot of beautiful character progression. With that came giant gaping plot holes.
Oh, no.
So I feel like, honestly, in retrospect, it felt a little rushed. There's a whole, do you know about Divorcegate?
No, don't tell me anything.
I mean, this has nothing to do with the show. One of the Duffer brothers' wife divorced him in between the writing, and so they feel like that impacted.
Affected, yeah.
Which, I mean, it's possible. They're people. Things happen.
Things happen. It can affect your productivity or whatever.
But just because they wrote it doesn't mean no one else had a look at these things and didn't say anything. So I'm not fully blaming that.
Oh, no. Did you finish Pluribus?
I did not. I have to go back and watch that because I went and watched a show I think you should cover in a future podcast. It is called My Husband Doesn't Fit. And it's exactly what it sounds like. And it's a Japanese drama, a J-drama. I was thoroughly engrossed. I really enjoyed it. It's 10 episodes. It gets a little bit long at parts, but it's just really interesting.
Is that what I was supposed to say?
Yeah, kind of. But
it gets a little long at parts.
No, because apparently
it's the other way around.
It's not that. It's the tunnel's not big enough. But either way, really interesting concept. I guess I had misconceptions about Japanese culture and sex, which clearly are not true because this is a show that apparently was very popular, very well done. So, but really interesting to talk about that these things can happen.
Okay. I will have to look up what that is.
Yeah, I kept waiting for a specific diagnosis and they never say one, but I had a few ideas floating in my head. I'm sure you have probably a couple ideas too. But
interesting.
Could be an interesting chat for a future episode.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I know. I feel like we're in TV watching season now. It's like hibernate, stay inside, and watch all the stuff.
Yes. Well, I just realized the next episode that I record that's all me is that book I still haven't finished. So I'm like, oh crap, I better fit that in. No pun intended.
I know. I have to make sure I have things for cocktails upcoming because I'm like clueless where I am right now in the world.
Well, I'm sure you'll see in the doc. I added even more ideas for me. So
did you?
I'm out to June now, my friend.
Oh my goodness.
I know.
You are.
I was on a roll.
Yeah.
I was.
The problem is when I do things too ahead of time, then I forget everything. Like I was fresh in my mind.
That's how today's episode is going to be, friends. You're going to be learning along with me because I read this book forever ago. I remember I loved it. I really, really enjoyed it. Talked to a bunch of people about it. And it's still a really good story, but details, hazy.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. All right. Before we introduce your drink, I'm just going to pop mine. It's an Olipop Classic Grape because my kids didn't want it. And it was left in the fridge. It's those fake sodas.
I've never had an Olipop, but I heard that Trader Joe's now has fake Olipops that are supposed to be delicious. So
right.
There's
try. A couple. There's Poppy. There's Olipop. Mm-hmm. They have probiotics and fiber. I don't know if I'll be gassy tonight in bed. We'll find out.
I mean, I drink caffeinated and carbonated stuff all day, so it's not going to make a difference for me.
All right.
Okay.
So what are we doing today?
So my cocktail. Sorry, I had to revert back to the names that are a spoiler for what we're going to talk about. But mine is called the Lobotomy. So I didn't realize this until I literally went to make it 45 minutes ago because I made it early. Was that it's supposed to be a shot. So
oh no, we have a proportion problem.
No, when I was making it, I was like, oh, I'm just going to top more because it's topped with stuff. So I'm just going to put more on top. Yeah. So the Lobotomy is supposed to be a shot, which is 1/2 ounce raspberry liqueur. I use Chambord. 1/2 ounce amaretto almond liqueur. I use like some no-name brand, but you can use like Di Serono or whatever like that. TM. This is not an ad, but if they want to sponsor us, I'm not going to say no. I do love me some Di Serono and some Chambord. 1/2 ounce of pineapple juice, and it says 1/4 of an ounce of champagne. Since I did not make it a shot, I put all that stuff and then I just topped with more champagne.
Nice.
The Duchess's champagne, by the way. Since I've spoken of her, yes. I cracked it open for New Year's. Didn't finish the bottle yet. It was still, I had a good cork in there, so it was still sparkling. So
nice.
Yeah. So all you do is shake those ingredients in a shaker with ice, strain into a shot glass, and then splash some champagne on top, and you're good to go.
Okay. This is not a brainy one like the Brain on Fire one that was like floating.
No,
debris.
And not chunky. No chunks. Although I'm thinking now, I don't know if carbonation in a shot is necessarily the best idea.
True.
So that's why I'm not doing it as a shot. Let me taste it because I haven't tasted it since I made it. Not bad.
Sounds, the
mild.
Flavors sound like they would go. Sounds decent.
Yeah. So with a name like lobotomy. What are we going to talk about? Lobotomies. So I'm going to talk about a book, as I was saying before, that I read some time ago. It is called My Lobotomy, a memoir by Robert. Wow, I'm looking right at it. It's not Robert. By Howard Dully. And so when Howard was 12 years old, he was getting into a little bit of ruckus. He was rambunctious with his brothers. He was, talking back to his parents, causing the normal 12-year-old boy issues. But somehow this got him into a mental health facility, and he was then one of the youngest people to have a transorbital or ice pick lobotomy performed on him.
Owie. Do we know
at 12.
What year-ish this
we
is?
do. We do.
Where we are in time.
That was kind of just a preview. So he was born on November 30th, 1948.
Okay.
He actually passed last year, February 2025.
Oh, he had a decent life then. Hey.
Rest in peace, Mr. Dully. I did not know that he passed last year. So let me see. So he was born in California. He was the eldest of several children. His mother died from cancer in 1954. So he was 6 when she passed. And then his father later married, very soon after, married a single mother named Shirley Lucine Hardin. So then he got some step siblings. Less than a year later, they got married. So pretty quick.
I guess, I think back then they needed like a mom figure. So it was kind of like.
It wasn't as unusual. It doesn't necessarily mean that they were, together on the side. It just means that's how things panned out.
Yeah. We need a mom for him. So let's figure it out.
So his lobotomy took place in 1960.
Okay. Still kind of late for me to think that people were doing that.
Yes, definitely. But it went on much longer than that. But we'll talk about that in a little while. So famed neurologist Walter Freeman, who we'll talk about much more in a little bit, he had diagnosed Howard as suffering from childhood schizophrenia since the age of 4. Now, he had just met him, but he's like, well, all the problems go back to here. This is when it started. This is what he's got. That being said, he'd been evaluated by several other medical and psychiatric professionals before that. None of them diagnosed him with any sort of psychiatric disorder and just said, inconsistent parenting, especially with his new stepmother. Sounds like the stepmother didn't necessarily like him very much. And so it seems like that was more of what prompted this mental health treatment, the stepmother being insistent that he was problematic. She said, quote, "He doesn't react either to love or to punishment. He objects to going to bed, but then sleeps well. He does a good deal of daydreaming, and when asked about it, he says, I don't know. He turns the room's lights on when there is broad sunlight outside."
That sounds like being a kid, pretty much.
Turning the lights on when there's light outside. Well, I guess I'm next in line for a lobotomy.
I do that all the time. My husband's like, "Why are all the lights on?" Like, I can't see in the dark. Okay, I need the lights on. But like everything about that was just being a child. Maybe a touch of ADHD, but even then, not to the point of. I wouldn't even necessarily, just based on that statement alone, I wouldn't even diagnose that. Right.
That was based on the daydreaming.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But either way, so. Now, that being said, even though the stepmother was clearly not loving her parenting of Howard, his father was in agreement to have him set up for this transorbital lobotomy, which at the time cost $200. In today's money and today's meaning 2024 was $2,126. So in 2026 dollars, that's like $65 million. Because inflation. It's a lot of money. So I'm skipping ahead a little, but you may ask, what is a lobotomy? For my friends out there who've never heard of it, you are so lucky. I feel like we grew up knowing about it, but even then it was more like lore and myth.
Right.
Like, ooh, this is something crazy they did back then. But this was true reality. So this transorbital lobotomy, it's exactly what it sounds like. They would go in through the eyeball, essentially lift your eyelid up and go in the space between your between your eyeball, your eyelid, and the skull. Tara's having a very visceral reaction to this. Like and essentially they would take something that was very long, sharp, thin instrument called an orbitoclast. I also heard it called a leucectomy. I'll talk about the tools and stuff in a minute. But basically they put it in and then hammered it a couple times.
Okay.
And this was intentional brain damage, hoping that it would damage an area of the brain that was misfiring or causing these behavioral issues. It was specifically for our friend Howard, it was inserted through each of his eye sockets.
Oh, poor kid.
2.5 inches.
Oh, jeez.
Before they start hammering that shit.
And it's like, doesn't sound very precise. We're just going for a region. We're not doing like,
exactly
like precise,
with tiny instruments and cameras. No, they're just sticking a sharp object in there, hammering it away and hoping for the best, which that'll come up later when I talk about why lobotomies quickly fell out of favor for many reasons, but we'll get into the drama about it because there's a lot to get into here. So that was when he was 12 years old. After that, he was institutionalized as a juvenile at Agnew State Hospital as a minor, and then transferred to Rancho Linda School in San Jose, which was a school for children with behavioral problems. Later, he was incarcerated. He was homeless for a time. He became alcoholic. And then after becoming sober and eventually getting a college degree in computer information systems, he became a California State certified behind the wheel instructor for a school bus company. So he was teaching people how to drive school buses.
Okay. So you sound like he did all right.
Yeah. So when Howard was in his 50s, not in the 1950s, when he was 50, he started to research what happened to him as a child because a lot of it was kind of foggy. He didn't necessarily understand. He knew he had behavioral problems. He knew he'd been in and out of hospitals, but he didn't necessarily know, why did this happen to me? What was the point of all of this? What went on? But by this time, both his stepmother and his father had died. And due to some of the difficulty that he had after the surgery, he couldn't necessarily trust his own memories about stuff. So he linked up with an NPR producer called David Ishay, who helped him do the research on this process and find and connect with other people and other families who had also undergone lobotomies by Walter Freeman, because he turned out to be one of the most prolific doctors to perform lobotomies, to the point where he was literally traveling across the country in a little white van and doing them in the back of his van.
Oh my God.
Now, that wasn't Howard's experience, but that was kind of later to come because when it became so popular. His was performed in a hospital and things like that. But as Howard and David were working together to kind of find out the history of this, they met a lot of other people. And they also met some of Walter Freeman's relatives and gained access to some of his archival records of this stuff. So Howard originally told his story on NPR in 2005, and then he co-authored the memoir that I'm talking about, My Lobotomy, in 2007. So I think I probably came across his book in about 2009, 2010, when I was in the beginning of grad school. So I came across it not too long after it was covered or it was released.
So it's interesting, like this guy could have come to like one of us and be like, yeah, I think I had like a thing stuck in my eye when I was a kid to my brain. I'm not really sure. Like, what did we do with that? Right.
Yeah.
Like, I'd be like, all right, let's order an MRI. I don't know.
Right. Well, and that's a really, really interesting part of the book, which I'm skipping ahead a little, but it's on topic of what you're talking about, is, I don't know if saying lucky is the right word, but when Howard had his lobotomy, he was at a point where his brain was still developing.
Right.
So his brain was able to use neuroplasticity to essentially make up for the areas that were damaged and still have relatively normal functioning.
Yeah. That's probably the only reason. Yeah.
Yeah. Had he been 5, even 10 years older, 17, 22, damage could have been lifelong and could have really prevented him from turning things around the way that he did. That being said, I am a big proponent of giving credit to someone's own determination and their own personality to fight through stuff. There's a lot of people who have been through horrific injuries, accidents, things that most people could never come back from, and they turn around and survive. So I think he definitely does have some of that survival instinct as well. So let's get into some details about lobotomy. There was one more thing I wanted to say about Howard. So as I said, he published My Lobotomy in 2007. It talks about his experience as a child, the effect of the procedure on his life, and as an adult, to kind of find out why it was medically necessary for that procedure, which we eventually find out it was unnecessary. Yeah. And then how both the finding out his own story, but then also talking about it publicly on NPR, National Public Radio, for those who don't know, kind of changed his life, how it impacted him, meeting other families, other people who had undergone this procedure, how it really kind of changed the course of his life. So that is all of that. The Times, I'm assuming the New York Times. Wait, I hovered over it. No, the Times, the British Times.
Oh.
Okay, whatever. The Times described it as uncomfortable reading.
Okay.
Was it uncomfortable? Yeah, but not to the point I didn't want to know more. It was uncomfortable,
Right.
this poor kid had to go through this, and
Right.
lobotomy is brutal, especially this way. But I wouldn't necessarily call it uncomfortable reading that you shouldn't read this. I would say if you're curious about this or you want to know more about how people can overcome things, how your brain can heal from damage, it's a really great book.
Yeah.
So he compared his lobotomy to young children today who are diagnosed with depression, bipolar, or ADHD without a second opinion, and then are subsequently over-medicated.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think our medications are a lot safer now.
Right.
But I think for anyone, if you're given a pretty serious diagnosis and you don't feel like it's true, you should definitely seek a second opinion.
We do have more criteria now, though, at least
we do
to hit things, especially in psychology and psychiatry. I mean, we have the big Bible that we've referenced many times, the DSM.
Yes. Well, the DSM was around back then, but still, I don't think people were held to those standards necessarily.
Now, you cannot diagnose schizophrenia in a child, correct? In a child, I think you have to be an adult.
Regular schizophrenia. No, it has to be after the age of 18.
Right.
But there are other things that you can call it, or so
you suspect that it's going to eventually be that kind of thing, and they give it other names.
Well, there is pediatric schizophrenia, but it's extremely rare, so it's not something that it's going to get tossed
with
out.
Psychosis or something along those lines.
Right, which that's actually, I totally forgot about that until you just said it. There is a documentary about a little girl who was diagnosed with pediatric schizophrenia, I think when she was 7. They were on the Oprah Winfrey Show. It was a really famous case, but they had documentation from, I think the earliest age was 18 months of her responding to stimuli that weren't there, and definitely unusual behaviors. That this was a substantiated diagnosis. This wasn't something somebody slammed at them and the parents were like, yep, that's what it is. This child was studied for a long time.
Right.
But that's for another episode. So another famous person who had a lobotomy, you know her well. Or actually, we don't know her at all because she was just a rumor. But Rosemary Ketamine. Rosemary Ketamine. Wow. What am I doing?
You're mixing up episodes there.
I'm mixing up a lot of stuff. Rosemary Kennedy, or technically her name was Rosemary, but they called her Rosemary. So that is the oldest daughter of Joseph Kennedy Sr. and Rose Kennedy. So that would be John F. Kennedy's sister.
Right.
And then the sisters of Robert F. Kennedy and Ted Kennedy. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because those three are brothers, so that it would be their sister. So she was born in 1918, and she had significant developmental delays. She was becoming increasingly irritable and difficult as she got older, and her father eventually arranged for her to have a lobotomy in 1941 when she was 23. For context, this was a relatively popular procedure at the time. So it's not like this was a rich guy with money and said, fix my kid. No, this was something a lot of people were seeking out. So it was of the time. It was in the zeitgeist. So they thought that this would help improve her. But unfortunately, the procedure left her permanently incapacitated, and she was unable to speak intelligibly after that. So that's a lobotomy gone wrong.
Yeah, big time.
For a very long time, the family kept it a secret about her situation, even from, I believe, from her brothers. I feel like they didn't necessarily know until later on in life. Because, they were younger than she was, so they would have been children and may not have realized what was going on. So that's just a little, flash of other people who had it. Another famous name that you may have heard of that is considered to have had an accidental lobotomy.
Okay.
Any ideas? It's a very famous case.
Sharp object.
Close. Or a sharp object is projected up through your head.
Right.
Is it a very famous case?
I remember a case of a person, but a person that we know the person, or it was just a random case.
The name may be familiar to you. It's a famous case in psychology.
Yeah, no, I know. The one who, I know.
Phineas Gage. Yes.
What is it called?
Phineas Gage.
Yeah, I didn't remember the name, but I remember learning about it.
Yeah, so he was a railroad construction foreman, and there was an accident where a large iron stake essentially was propelled through his head, destroying much of the left temporal lobe of his brain. he's an interesting case because it helped us understand when there is damage to the temporal lobe, which is the front of your brain, different things that can happen, changes in personality, hypersexuality, anger and aggression, things like that. So his is considered an accidental lobotomy. It's not truly a lobotomy. His is just more of a tragic brain injury. He did survive this. They did remove the metal bar from his head. He did lose one of his eyes, but he did go on to live a pretty significant life after that and has kind of become this legend in both pop culture, pseudoscience, and phrenology, in neurology and psychology, just seeing all the things that we learned from that. And if you look on the Wikipedia page, there's this really cool graphic that's doing like a 360 turn of like where it went in his brain.
Right. And what angle it went through. And
yeah. So it went up through his chin and then kind of straight up through and destroyed his eye.
I'm fairly certain I've seen like a drawing of this. Yeah.
And most people have probably seen either the picture of him with the rod, the picture of him after. Honestly, this one picture on Wikipedia, Phineas could get it. He was a hottie. Like, hello, sir. Even with like his one eye all messed up, if he was cast in a movie today, I would say someone with like a strong jaw.
Now I gotta look his picture up.
Yeah, strong jaw, chiseled features, pretty good looking guy. Like,
oh, he actually,
right?
I'm watching.
Phineas could get it
right there. He is a pretty good looking guy.
I can't think of like what actor he would look like though, but he definitely is like quite a handsome gentleman.
Yeah, like
even with his injury, good for him.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So that was a little segue, sorry, to let's go back to terrible things. So lobotomies. So the idea of lobotomy, it kind of harkens back to an episode I covered a while ago when we talked about severance and the split brain procedure. So that's a little bit different. The split brain procedure is cutting the corpus callosum.
Yep.
I had a brain fart. I'm like, I don't think I'm saying the right words. So thank you for saying them. So it's essentially severing the tissue that connects the two lobes of the brain. So that way, if there's problems or seizures on one side of the brain, they're not transferring to the other side of the brain. Yeah. A lobotomy is different, where you're going in, and at this point in time, when we're talking about Walter Freeman's lobotomy, going in and purposely damaging certain parts of the area that you believe are the cause of behavioral issues. For a very long time, this was thought to be helping with a lot of psychiatric disorders until we learned that if it wasn't helping, it was definitely hurting people, but oftentimes causing more severe problems, maybe different problems. So now maybe people are not, wiling out and arguing with their parents and, stealing things. Now they're nonverbal and drooling and can't dress themselves. So it's like we're trading one problem for another when we don't necessarily, that's not the intention. So a little history. Lobotomy, from the Greek lobos, tome, which is cutting the lobe or slicing the lobe. It is a form of neurosurgical treatment or psychosurgery, which I'll talk about in a minute, typically to treat a psychiatric or a neurological disorder. It tends to focus mostly on the prefrontal cortex. So that's kind of up here in the brain.
Yep.
So this is frontal lobe, so it's slightly above that. And then it's kind of in the back part of the frontal lobe. It's hard if you don't have the 3D model that I can take apart and show you, which I did have at one point in time. I don't know where my toy brain went.
Where's my brain?
Where is my brain? So the originator of the procedure was Antonio Egas Moniz. He was a Portuguese neurologist, and he won the Nobel Prize for Physiology or Medicine in 1949 for the discovery of therapeutic value of leucotomy. So I said before, the leucotome is what they used to call the tool that they used to alleviate certain psychoses. However, now in retrospect, a lot of people find that prize controversial because basically, hey, we're giving you a gift for screwing up somebody's brain.
Yeah.
But we have to keep everything in context. At the time, this was, it changed the thought of the field about how you can change someone's behavior by changing their biology.
Right.
That behavior wasn't fully choice. And so I think that's really important, especially in the field of psychology, that some things happen because it's just something going on with your brain.
Right.
Versus you're making a choice.
Yes. Right. To your physical body. No, that makes sense. I understand that was a beneficial understanding, but
absolutely. So then Walter Freeman comes along and he modified and championed the procedure. And he performed the first lobotomy at a mental hospital in the United States in 1936. With the use of lobotomy increased dramatically between the early 1940s and the 50s, by 1951, almost 20,000 lobotomies had been performed in the U.S. alone.
Jeez.
More lobotomies were performed on women than on men.
Of course they were, because they were hysterical. Okay.
And I was going to say, we're in the 1950s, where the hysterical housewife with all her problems.
Oh, yeah.
She didn't want to cook and clean. How dare her? She wanted to leave the house and get a job. Let's rectify that problem right away. A 1951 study that nearly 60% of all American lobotomy patients were women. And there's some research about in other countries, but it was not just happening in the US, it was happening worldwide. So, as I said, we talked a little bit about what the surgery is. Now, an ice pick lobotomy is different than a I'm going to keep saying it wrong, leucotomy. That was a little bit more precise. People were often sedated where they were awake during lobotomies.
Okay.
Yeah, you just kind of came and sat down and opened your eye and saw what happened. So it was a little bit more of a true surgery before Walter Freeman got his hands on it, which we'll get into. But immediately following that original, as planned, the way you're supposed to do a frontal lobotomy, people were often in a stupor, were incontinent, and it took some time for them to return to relatively normal functioning. However, some people had the opposite, where they had an enormous appetite, gained significant amount of weight, had seizures, things like that. And so that's a little bit like what I was talking about with Phineas Gage, when we learned that certain parts of the frontal lobe and the prefrontal cortex control certain types of behavior. And those initial drives, like hunger drive and sex drive, are impacted by parts of the frontal lobe, not fully, but parts of them. And so damage to that area can lead to that type of behavioral change. So the purpose of the operation, like I said, was to reduce the symptoms of mental disorders, but then we found out that it was then at the expense of the person's original personality, their intelligence, their ability for self-care, and all of that kind of stuff. And Maurice Partridge, a British psychiatrist who conducted a follow-up study of 300 lobotomy patients, said that overall it reduced the complexity of their psychic life. So basically it was taking away their personality, their ability to engage with others, and left them often emotionally blunted and restricted in their intellectual range.
So you just cut out their personality. You just kind of like made them blah.
Right. Ugh. Which, this is skipping ahead a bit, but this is essentially what all of that a first original class of antipsychotics did without surgery.
Right.
We just blunted everybody down.
True.
And left them drooling and shuffling around in hospitals until we figured out a better solution.
Right.
So luckily, most people are not like that now. Lobotomies now are much, much different, which we'll talk about in a minute. So Walter Freeman, as I said, despite at this point already knowing that there were these risks, there were these problems happening afterwards, he was on the lobotomy train and loving it. And he basically was saying that, hey, don't give your kids drugs. Do this instead. This will fix stuff. Drugs is just a Band-Aid. This is going to fix things for a kid.
Okay.
Yeah. So lots and lots of people went and had lobotomies. And honestly, a pretty good percentage of them did return to work, did return to their lives. Were they the same people? Did they have the same joie de vivre? No, but they were able to still function. And so that's kind of, I think, why it continued for so long that it did, because if person A had a bad reaction, that was just person A, because person B, C, and D are doing great. So let's keep trying it. There's always going to be, a little bit of spilled milk when we're doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that was kind of the mindset. In the 1940s, the mortality rate, and this is the immediate mortality rate, they don't necessarily have records on people who died shortly thereafter, but between 4 and 5% died on the lobotomy table.
Right.
Or in the lobotomy van, as we'll get to in a minute. Yeah, I wish I was making this up. This is literal history. This is shit we did.
We've got mobile dog grooming, and then we've got mobile lobotomies. I mean, just get a van, fit it out, ready to go.
Yeah. So Walter Freeman made up a name for this little problem he was having with those folks who didn't do great. Uh-oh. He called it surgically induced childhood.
Okay.
Doesn't that sound nice?
infantile, essentially. We're going to make you a baby again.
You literally were just reading my Wikipedia notes.
Yeah.
Because it said it left people with an infantile personality, and that a period of maturation would then occur later on, which would lead to recovery. We know that's not the case.
Yeah.
He described one patient who was a 29-year-old woman following the lobotomy was a smiling, lazy, and satisfactory patient with the personality of an oyster.
An oyster?
This is from the man who did.
I mean, I've heard of happy as a clam. So what's the personality of an oyster?
Probably not as happy as a clam, especially not if you had an ice pick shoved in your eye. Oh, and so he also had a patient whose name he couldn't remember, who just endlessly poured coffee from an empty pot.
Okay.
Just
right. Yeah. Okay.
And then so they developed some reward systems for these people who were now incapacitated to do things. So the rewards were ice cream.
Well,
And the punishment were smacks. It's literally what it says, punishment smacks.
Smacks.
It's like, so
Smack
physical
or like a...
Yeah. So physical abuse or sugar, one or the other.
Can we have ice cream though? I mean, that part's cool, but that's about it.
If you're not lactose intolerant than I am, then ice cream, not the best. Yeah. So history, like I said before, it was created in the 1930s, but earlier in the 20th century, a lot of the hospitals were seeing more and more people coming in with severe mental health problems and really struggling to figure out ways to treat them and not just house them. So they had tried a lot of different therapies that have also come up as not so great. So insulin shock therapy. Do you want to speak to what that is?
Insulin shock therapy.
You don't know what that is?
I assume they give them a ton of insulin till they go hypoglycemic and then they fix them.
Did you not see Beautiful Minds? They do insulin shock therapy in that. Yes, it's essentially what you say though.
Yeah.
Is that they basically give someone so much insulin that it induces a seizure, and then hopefully that seizure resets the system.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess they're different similar things now, but yeah,
like electroshock therapy.
Right.
Yes, but there's also a thing called, and I don't know what this is, but you probably will, cardiazol shock therapy. I'm assuming it's something similar to insulin, where it's some sort of medication
induced, I assume. Yeah,
it says it's a drug formerly used as a circulatory and respiratory stimulant. High doses cause convulsions.
Fun.
Deep sleep therapy.
We give you anesthesia until you knock out.
Essentially, putting people into a medication-induced coma, hoping that they'll reset.
It's kind of like what happened to Michael Jackson, except for he didn't reset.
Well, and he did it on purpose. So
yeah.
Malarial therapy.
Give people malaria.
An injection of malaria parasites.
So interestingly enough, my next episode, people who have that disorder can be resistant to getting malaria, actually. So stay tuned for the next episode if you want to know what that is.
Fun facts. Brought to you by Tara. But basically they were giving people the malaria parasites, which then lead to high fever, which would then cause seizures and whole sort of thing. So basically there was this thought that a seizure is causing your brain to reset. Like the blue screen of death on our computers, which no one gets anymore. So that is probably an outdated term as well. But we now know that's not the case, that seizures can often cause more damage than initially. Really depends on the type of seizure, the length of it, where it's occurring, lots of different factors. So it was kind of a messy business of, hey, let's just try it and see how it works, much like lobotomy was a messy business.
Right. So now just question, trephination, which is drilling holes.
It's not penetrating the brain. It's
just the skull,
holes in the skull.
And that sort of predates, goes back to ancient times, right?
It does, but they will still do that if there's swelling on the brain to relieve pressure.
I've seen that happen for a brain bleed when I was a student, and they did it bedside and everything. But I'm thinking about what they tried to use it for back then.
Oh, they tried to use it for everything.
For everything.
Yeah. Which, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, little hole in your skull.
Not as bad as, ice pick in your brain.
True. Yeah. But the first thing that just popped into my head, no pun intended, was that if you've experienced trephination.
Yes.
Not trepidation, trephination.
Yes.
If you then have some sort of accident or insult to your brain, couldn't that cause cracking and splitting on the skull, since there's already a weakness?
Swelling would actually be relieved.
Right? No, I mean the actual skull itself. Say you had that trauma, and then you had a head injury. Couldn't that cause more cracks in the skull.
Know. And that's a physics question more than a medical question. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm just thinking,
what is
like
the
an
impact?
egg. An egg's got a little hole in
right,
it, and then you drop it, it's going to crack
right.
easier.
What is the tension? What is the strength? What is the, you know? But theoretically, I guess so.
Yeah. So there's a lot more history. It's kind of boring. Not going to go into it. Blah, blah, blah. They've been poking holes in people's brains since
for a long time.
Late 1800s. But the leucotomy, which I was talking about before, was really the precursor to the lobotomy. I think they changed the name just because leucotomy is hard for Americans to say, because they still called it leucotomy everywhere else. Same idea. So lots of different people were using it. This was kind of interesting. John Fulton was a Yale neuroscientist, and he did primary research on cortical function of primates.
Okay.
And he started the first primate neurophysiology lab at Yale in the 1930s. Was he doing lobotomies on chimpanzees? Yes, their names were Becky and Lucy.
Oh.
Yes, they had subsequent changes in behavior and intellectual functioning, just like all the peoples did. So, yeah. And the fun part was that Becky, who was the more emotional of the two, exhibited frustrational behavior. So basically having tantrums, rolling on the floor, pooping in it, and then throwing that poop. And you know what? If you gave me a lobotomy, I might throw my poop at you too. Just saying. Was Becky off? No. Becky knew what was up. Becky with the good hair knew what was going on. However, then they surgically removed their entire frontal lobes. Again, the behavior changed, and Becky was pacified to such a degree that they said that she had joined a happiness cult.
Okay.
Is that happy or just not functioning?
Right.
There's
That's
a difference.
Staring off into space with no cognition. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. Like that's saying like all goldfish are happy. How do you know? You don't know the emotional life of a goldfish. They could be really depressed. I don't know.
They could be. I mean, it's kind of boring.
They could be really angry. Could you imagine an aggressive goldfish? I'm sure there's one
the
out
glass,
there.
Like, boom.
Yes. Get you.
We're going
fall
to
asleep
now.
Yeah. Yeah. I haven't even had all my drink yet, and this is the craziness that's coming out of my mouth. So as we were alluding to, this is talking more about lobectomy. That's something different. A lobectomy is removing either the entire lobe or a large portion of the lobe, instead of causing damage to it. But there is some benefit to that depending on what's going on with your brain. So as I was talking about before, this was kind of I don't want to say the beginnings because it wasn't the beginning of psychosurgery in general, but realizing that if you do surgery on people's brains, it can change behavioral issues, essentially. And it wasn't all bad, but this was one of the bigger things that became readily available to the public. So that guy who created the lobotomy, Muniz in Portugal, his initial patients were between the ages of 27 and 62, 12 female, 8 male. 9 of the patients had a diagnosis of depression. 6 had schizophrenia. 2 had panic disorder. 1 had mania, catatonia, and manic depression. And all of them had had illnesses for as little as 4 weeks to as much of 22 years. But the mean of them had been seriously ill for at least a year before they underwent this surgery. And so complications were observed in every patient.
Everyone.
Yes.
Okay.
Including increased temperature, vomiting, bladder and bowel incontinence, diarrhea, ocular affections, such as ptosis and nystagmus. I don't know what ptosis is, but I know nystagmus is when
ptosis is your eyelid like drooping.
Oh, okay.
Nystagmus, is the eye back
and then also apathy, kinesthesia, lethargy, timing. I didn't read the whole sentence. Timing and local disorientation, so not knowing where you're at in space, not knowing what time it is. Kleptomania.
Oh.
And abnormal sensations of hunger, which, as I was talking about, there's certain areas of the frontal lobe. If those areas are damaged, it can kind of set off those types of behaviors. However, there were no deaths, and he did not consider that any of his patients had deteriorated.
Right.
So they're all just shitting themselves and stealing stuff and really, really hungry, and their eyes are going nuts, but nobody's.
No, we're all good.
Everybody's doing awesome. Yeah. So as I was saying, this was happening all over the world. It wasn't just in the U.S., but Walter Freeman was the big guy doing it in the U.S. He first learned about Moniz. He actually met him personally and trained under him. And then he was the one who was like, well, I'm going to tweak this a little bit. I'm going to make it a lot easier. We don't have to sedate people. We don't even, like, they can stay awake. It's totally fine. And so he started doing the ice pick lobotomy that we were talking about. He didn't use an actual ice pick. That's just what people called it because it looked like that.
Right.
And he felt like there was a neuropathological basis for insanity, essentially saying there's something wrong with the brain that's causing mental illness. So if we fix or get rid of that problematic part of the brain, everything will be fine. So he purchased a leucotome, which was that tool that was originally used. But then he started just doing whatever the heck he wanted to do. And he adapted his own technique called the Freeman-Watts technique, some poor dude named Watts, also known as the Freeman-Watts standard prefrontal lobotomy, which was then styled as the precision method.
Right.
Doesn't sound super precise to me.
No. Nope.
That being said, this wasn't the one that he was doing in the back of vans. This was when he first started out and was a little bit more legit when he was doing things. However, he was still doing, I'm glad you brought it up, the trephination. So he was still drilling holes in the skull as well. So he was doing it in an operating room with trained neurosurgeons, sedating people, everything like that. And most of the people had been residents in state mental hospitals, so they weren't necessarily using like legit operating rooms and anesthesia, but it was at least in a hospital setting. There were nurses and all that stuff. And then he started training psychiatrists. So that way, we don't need the medical staff. Just train the psychiatrists to do it. It's totally fine. Okay. So the whole ice pick thing comes from, he was trying to describe a lobotomy to some people, and to exemplify it, he took an ice pick from his kitchen and a grapefruit and started just poking around for practice. And then after he was done with the poor grapefruit, he started practicing on cadavers. So in theory, he was trying to be precise with this, but yeah. So it seems like the idea of where he was trying to sever connections, and we learned later it didn't always work out, was that it was between the prefrontal cortex and the thalamus. So as I said, the prefrontal cortex is kind of behind the frontal lobe. So if this is the frontal lobe here, and if you're listening, you can't see any of these hand motions I'm making, but your prefrontal cortex is what would be behind the squishy brain part in your forehead. Now, the interesting part is the thalamus is deep within the brain. Yeah. And like down. Yeah. So in theory, you would have to be angling down. Right. Like if you're going through the eye socket, it would be going down towards the nose, towards the gums.
Right. Yeah, toward the brainstem sort of. Yeah.
Which that's the other thing. We go too deep and hit the brainstem and all bets are off.
Yeah.
So we're not going to get into the neurobiology of that. But quick tip for everyone listening, don't mess up your brainstem. Just don't do it. Bad news. Don't do it. Keep that area safe. You want to keep your private safe. You want to keep your brainstem safe. You're doing
PSA by Nicole.
You're doing nothing else day to day. Keep those 3 areas safe, or 2 areas, depending on your gender. So Freeman performed his first transorbital lobotomy on a woman named Ellen Ionesco, who had bouts of manic depression and suicidal ideation. And after that, he was just advertising himself all over the place. He suggested that if they didn't have conventional anesthesia, electroshock therapy was great to just make someone unconscious initially. And then, like I said, later on, he wasn't sedating people at all. So as I said before, over 40,000 people were lobotomized in the US. And here we go to the criticism, finally, as if I haven't been criticizing enough. But shockingly enough, what country do you think started to criticize it? You're going to be really shocked by this answer.
Oh, really? I don't know. It's not the U.S.
But it does have U and S in it, and it's no longer a country.
It's USSR?
Yes.
I thought they did all kinds of crazy shit.
Soviet psychiatry was like, nope, this ain't cool.
Did all kinds of experiments on people and animals and twins and craziness.
Yeah. Wow. No, they were very concerned.
This was too much for them.
Yeah, too much for them. In 1936 and 1937, they did a lot of reviews of his studies, and they essentially said there's too many severe complications. The mortality rate of 5% was too high for them, and they felt like it wasn't effective. Like, they're not fixing the problems that these people came in with. They're just giving them new, bigger problems.
Right.
So like, you're not getting rid of someone's depression. Now you're just making them so messed up that their depression is the least of their problems.
Well, it's one thing I guess we agree with USSR on.
Yeah. I mean, they don't exist anymore, so we can agree with them on everything. But yeah. But what I like about that is that, and I think this is something that's a very European mindset, is being very practical. And so they were being very practical about it. And they were like, here's a problem. Yes, we want to fix the problem. What are we doing? We're making more problems. That doesn't work.
Doesn't make sense.
I kind of like that very straightforward mindset of, and there's a quote that says, through a lobotomy, they were changing an insane person to an idiot. Right. They don't use that term anymore, but essentially that's what they were doing.
Right. But they, yes.
So in 1977, U.S. Congress, during Jimmy Carter's administration, created the National Committee for Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research to investigate allegations that psychosurgery, including lobotomy, could be used to control minorities and restrain individual rights.
Wow. Huh.
Now, that being said, it wasn't just minorities or people of a certain standing that were given lobotomies. It was all kinds of people. It was a Kennedy, richest family in the world, or richest family at the time. So, it was a lot of people getting them. But basically what they were saying is, at the end of the day, we're not using it on the right people. And I feel like here they're talking minorities, more women, since it was 60% of women. But I'm sure there was definitely a racial disparity as well. So we talked about some famous people already who had it. It's definitely portrayed in a lot of literary and cinematic things. Tennessee Williams, the playwright, apparently his sister had a lobotomy. And so a lot of things that happen in some of his plays kind of allude to insanity and having surgery to fix people or to make them right. So that's kind of where that inspiration came from. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. They don't actually show one, but they talk about it. And the quote, which is kind of sad, it's called a frontal lobe castration, a form of punishment and control after which there's nothing in the face, just like one of those store dummies. You can see his eyes, how they burned him out over there. His eyes are all smoked up and gray and deserted inside.
Yeah, you just took the essence out of them.
Exactly. So that is my fun story of lobotomy. Psychosurgery, as I was saying before, there's lots of other ones. Lobotomies performed now are not like this. They are far more specific and targeted to certain areas that there's been proof that these are the areas that are misfiring or causing issues. And so I believe a lot of it now is more burning those areas, but very finite. And it's not, just grabbing a tool from your kitchen and shoving it in somebody's eye.
The whole concept of just sticking it up in there.
Yeah. And this actually happens. These are things that happen to many, many people.
That's crazy.
So in the show notes, there's a link to the book, into the original NPR episode by Howard Dully and his discussion of his journey. There's some other great stuff in there. And there's a website called StoryCorps, like CORPS, where it also talks about his book and his NPR article. And there's some pictures of some folks who had lobotomy before and after. That one woman, Ellen, that I talked about before, there's a picture of her. And as of May 2004, she was still alive. Clearly not a vivacious person, but still surviving physically after all that time. And there's a lot of pictures of Howard as a child before his lobotomy. There are some very graphic pictures of during his lobotomy.
Oh, wow.
And immediately thereafter. And then some of the clinical notes from his treatment as well.
So they were able to get all that.
They were able to get all of that. And then they do have some interviews with some other folks who had lobotomies or from their family members, and for some doctors that didn't necessarily administer them, but were like working in hospitals when things were happening. There's a story of one doctor who actually met Dr. Freeman and kind of witnessed him going in and out and taking patients in and out and doing things. And he said, at that time, he didn't have the authority to tell him to stop or to do anything. But it definitely stuck with him, and he's talking about it now. So some really interesting information on those show notes. And Freeman he is the one who did perform Rosemary Kennedy's operation.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
This guy was it. He was the guy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think there's a book too about the Kennedy men or something, and there's a whole thing about her in there.
Yeah.
I have to read it. I've seen the cover of this book and I like wanted to read it for a while. So she died, I'm just seeing here, 2005.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And like, as I was saying, I think a lot of these families were sold a false bill of goods. You know, they were told this is going to help your loved one. This is going to fix things. And so I don't think it was all, you know, evil stepmothers sending, you know, their annoying stepchild to get this. I don't even think that's necessarily the case for Howard. I think it was just a combination of parents not knowing better, not knowing how to handle things, doctors making promises that they couldn't keep. And then this guy who's just telling everyone this is the answer that you're looking for and then believing it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking at her stuff. It's very interesting. Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, please don't stick ice picks in your head. Okay, people? Like, no, let's not do that.
Try not to stick anything anywhere that doesn't belong there.
I mean,
that includes Q-tips in your ears.
True. But Phineas Gage, hottie.
He didn't do it on purpose, but Finney could get it.
Yeah. He didn't live that long, though. He died he was born in 1823, died in 1860. So, I mean,
you had a metal rod shoved in your head. How long are you going to live anyway?
Oh my goodness. I know there's been a lot of other things about accidental ones where people, you know, that's a whole thing about different things impaling people.
That both freaks me out and fascinates me.
Yeah. Yeah. Penetrating trauma of any sort is not my thing. I'm not a fan. I'm not like...
I mean, I don't think it's anyone's thing. I don't think anyone's a fan of it. Well, it just happens.
Trauma surgeons are probably all like, cool.
Yeah. You know? The one that really like gets me and I never want to know and it freaks me out about pool filters is it's evisceration, right? When your bowels come out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Let's pull it all out from the other end.
And then they can put it back?
Oh. It might not really. No, probably not.
I mean, if it's stuck in a pool drain, probably not. But, you know.
You're probably getting a colostomy or ileostomy or something of the sort.
If you're surviving.
True.
All your insides just fell out.
Okay.
That made you go and not the ice pick through your eye?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, different things. But eyeballs, like the thought of eyeballs being like punctured themselves and like all the stuff going. Blah, blah, blah,
as I say, anything squishy, is gross. Which all insidey parts are squishy. So
all insidey parts are squishy.
It's true.
Yeah,
aren't they?
Yeah,
they're all gelatinous and
they are pretty squishy.
Squishy. You shouldn't step on any of them.
Yes, or stick an ice pick in any of them, please.
You should not be shoving ice picks into any orifices of your body.
Whatever happened to ice picks? We don't even need them anymore. We don't have big blocks of ice that we need to crack. We have little refrigerators that make our ice for us, or we have ice
make it in tiny little cubes.
You know, we don't need like a big block of ice pick to get our ice.
I mean, I'm sure you could find one at a thrift shop.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason to use the tool in some way, shape, or form. I don't know. Maybe
if you're an ice sculptor, I'm sure you use an ice
yes, pick. I bet. But I bet those are like fancy ice picks that like have different tips for like how fine and perfect you want to make it. So
if only we had the fine and perfect tips for the brain lobotomy.
Exactly.
Ones.
They would have been more accurate. Seriously.
I mean, we still didn't know what the heck we were doing, so I don't think it would have been more accurate.
No.
Would have been less damage, maybe.
They were like, this looks good.
Yeah. So that's my episode, friends.
Yeah, I like the story. Quite interesting. Go Google some pictures if you would like to.
I mean, the pictures are just sad. It's just someone laying there and you see someone with like about to bang it down. And then you see afterwards, he's got two giant black eyes.
Yuck. All right.
I just think it's weird that they took a picture of before, during, and after. Like somebody stood there with a camera and was like, now?
Let's do it.
There's some things you should not photograph, and that's one of them.
Yeah. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for listening to Medical Media Mixer.
The perfect cocktail. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Medical Media Mixer podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps others find the show. Want to keep the conversation going? Follow us on social media. We're at Medical Media Mixer Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and on Pinterest, the Medical Media Mixer board.
If you'd like to support the show and help us grow, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast, and on Buy Me a Coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast. If you have a topic idea, feedback, or just want to say hi, send us an email at medicalmediamixer@gmail.com. You can also stream all of our episodes and find more info on our website, medicalmediamixer.podbean.com. We're available on all major podcast platforms, so no matter where you listen, we're there. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep mixing medicine and media.